time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur Podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and today I have with me all the way from Fort Lauderdale, is that right? Florida. Yeah, that's where you said you were. Kevin O'Connor. Welcome, Kevin. I'm glad to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here. I love the concept of your podcast, Maturepreneur. I think that is a great play on with words, and it certainly resonates with me.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to be talking about that because you're late to the game, but that's late as long as you're on this side of the dirt. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of fascinating, interesting, kind of seemingly disparate but connected things with Kevin. We're going to be talking about coming out late in life. We're going to be talking about his book and story and memoir, 2 Floors Above Grief. We're also going to be talking about how to really connect with family and family legacy and a method that he's used to create that. So there's a bunch of different things we're going to talk about. But first, let me formally introduce you. Then we'll find out some of the, hidden secrets behind the scenes about Kevin. And then we're going to launch into all sorts of cool discussions about really what does it mean to be fully expressed at this age or any age. So in addition to writing and publishing 2 Floors Above Grief, Kevin O'Connor enjoys chronicling the stories of families and friends through tracing genealogical histories, writing, and picture collections. His prior writing includes personal letters, articles in professional publications, dissertations, anthologies, and presentations delivered at conferences, seminars, and webinars. He brings people together personally and professionally. Collaborating with friends and relatives, he plans family and class reunions. He's performed in over 30 theater productions since the 1970s and been active with SpartRide, a bicycling group that rode annually from Miami to Key West, raising funds for HIV awareness, treatments, and education. That's a fairly long ride. He was a teacher, principal, professor, and curriculum coordinator in California, Illinois, and Florida from 73 to 2020. In his final educational position, he authored content and provided training in areas including support of the LGBTQ advocacy and sexual health family life. He resides in Fort Lauderdale with his husband, Leon. Their family includes 5 sons and 7 granddaughters, and at least 1 puppy that I know of. He references further connections to his book and continues his story and highlights perspectives about his interests at KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com or on Instagram, The Grief Navigator. All right, so that's a lot of the official word about you. You sound very and you have a lot of different interests. You're definitely a Renaissance kind of guy. So let's launch into that in a minute. But first, tell me something that even reading that very, colorful bio, people wouldn't guess about you when they meet you.
Great question. They probably wouldn't guess that when I was born in 1950, my parents brought me home to a bassinet that was placed next to a performance stage. The apartment in which we resided on the 3rd floor of a Victorian house had formerly been a ballroom. And when my parents, when they came into this space to create their apartment, the space had 2 stages in it, performance stages that were used in the 1800s and early 1900s for people who came to this house to be entertained by orchestras. And when my parents converted the space into an apartment, one of the spaces they created by putting up walls was the bedroom that was to be occupied, was at the time they converted, it was occupied by my older brother, and then I came along in 1950, and my younger brother a year later. But in that space where our bedroom was actually one of the performance stages. So my bed, go back as far as the bassinet or the early crib, that was right next to the stage. And until about the time I was 8 years old, my bed was next to the stage. The stage had a performance area, and then underneath they had places that our family used for storage, and in a kid's world, it was a play area and a place to have a fort and so that whole, you'd mentioned in my bio that I continue to be active in theater. And in fact, I was at a rehearsal last night. But I think that the roots of that have to do with me from the time I was a week old, being brought home, living and breathing and experiencing stage life.
It
So
makes
that's
sense. It makes sense. You were born
yeah,
literally to be on stage.
there.
So
I think so. I think
I think
sometimes
that
I
makes
say
a lot
that.
of sense.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about your home that you grew up in because it certainly sounds interesting, and that's the just behind the book, Two Floors Above Grief. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your why. What would you consider your purpose in life? Or because we don't want to dabble around in the shallow end of the pool. So let's dive right in. What's your purpose in life, Kevin?
Well, I think if I look back at a theme for my life, my purpose has always been to bring people together and to keep my world expanded, but to do that through communication, whether that be letters or phone calls. Nowadays, it would be through email. But as I look back to look at my purpose, I've always enjoyed the idea that my family or my friends being together
Mhm.
and developing a community. And whether I did that as eighth grader and bringing friends together, or if I did that in college by making myself available for different positions or leadership positions or fraternities or social things to bring people together, or in my career as an educator, um, as a teacher, creating a community among my students and my families as a teacher, and
Mhm.
doing the same thing when I was a principal. I was a principal for 21 years of elementary schools, two different
So why
ones.
is
So,
community so important to you?
um, well, I think it's just for me, part of that theme has to do with I think that I'm not a solitary person. I'm not a person who chooses to be alone. I'm not and I don't knock that at all because I know that that works really well for a number of people. But for myself, I always wanted to be with other people, and it speaks to me that I sought out different a profession, education, where I was always with people, whether it was the second graders I had in my class, or whether it was the staff of teachers with whom I worked, or the people with whom I was getting higher degrees. I always sought out things that were more collaborative, more um, intersectional, more where I was with other people, and have never shied away from that.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of wanting to be either with people or in front of people, that's something a strength I've recognized and something that I consider an asset and that I enjoy
Yes.
and that I like to do. So.
All right. So let's talk about um, there's so many different things that I want to talk to you about. So we're going to come back to the genealogy and how that's kind of been a big part of your life and your memoir. But let's talk about your journey as someone who has come out at the age of 55 and after two long
Mm-hmm.
marriages. So
Mm-hmm.
so tell us a little bit about that journey in general. So start, how did you go through those two marriages? What was it that took so long for that to be the case? And
Yeah.
what was that experience like for you?
Well, as is true in most coming out stories, the experience for me was my own. I don't think when I read about or talk with others about their own experiences in making this journey, there are no two stories that are alike.
Mhm.
There is a certain individuality. It has to be individual. There's no prescription.
Yeah.
There's no, and even if you share stories, as I have often done, even if when you share stories, there's might be a commonality because there's still a journey that has to be taken or is taken, but everybody's approach has to be different. Even late in life now, later in life, when I was working in the school system at the last 8, 10 years of my life and working with LGBT youth, um, they were saying, "Hey, why'd you wait so long? Why did it take you till age 55 to come out?" Or else they'd ask me, "Well, what can you say to me to come out?" And I'd say, "Well, you have to, I want you to work to embrace the situation as your own." And certainly, as I found myself talking to kids who were very on edge, and some kids, they knew if they came out, they'd be kicked out of their house.
Mhm.
So, with kids in those situations, I'd say, well, you'll have to, I don't want you on the street. I don't want you to be put in that position, but I would try to point them and direct them to resources we had in our community where they could go
Mhm.
to people they could talk to, so that people that they could take those steps that they wanted to do at their age to come out.
Mhm.
And I would talk about, still the concept of the closet and coming out and the door. And I said, I would try to tell them that sometimes the door just has a crack
Mhm.
and you have to, and sometimes the door will close again. And that was certainly the case in my my life. It opened and closed a few times and I had to figure out how to open it again. And yeah, I would work with these 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids who had far fewer life experiences than I did, but just tried to make a safe place for them.
Mhm.
And because looking back in my own experiences, um, there certainly was a lot of fear. There was a lot of I know I feel this way, but what am I going to do with this? I'm in a society that expects a guy, or in my case, a guy expects a guy to be married in order to have kids. And so that was the kind of, and I wanted to have a family.
Mhm.
And so that was part of, and my first marriage was with a woman, college friend. We are still excellent friends. We just texted each other yesterday. Um, we're still very good friends. Um, and then she helping me to unpack a part of a coming out, and then me essentially going back in and saying and getting married again, and then being married for almost 25 years and raising two kids, and then finally deciding I've got to do something. This is going to eat me up inside, and it had been eating me up probably since the time I was 12 and 13, even before I knew what to call it.
Mhm.
So that coming out process for me was very
Long.
very long.
Yes.
And I talk about, I make reference to it, and when I'm talking to people about, it was like having a pit in my stomach, and I could mask that pit a lot of times and really put it away pretty strongly, and it would go away. And especially in the midst of raising two kids and being married and having a family and being engaged as a really enthusiastic dad, loving dad. I didn't really let that enter into my psyche. Um, so
Just kind
it was difficult. It was difficult. Yeah.
And so you knew from a fairly early age, but as you said, if you wanted to have a family, you pretty much at that time in society, your option was to get married. So that kind of explains the first marriage. But then you said you were aware of that and kind of worked through that with your first wife. What prompted you to go back in, as you called it, and get married again? Because you were
Okay.
aware of it. So what happened? What happened
Sure.
for you?
Well, after getting to a certain point with my first wife and going through counseling with her, and then having it was a comfort for me at the time when I was whatever 28, 29. It was a comfort for me at that time to know that I was able to tell somebody that, not only her, but um, my the counselor was seeing. So that was so I knew I could talk about it.
Mhm.
But then after we separated and divorced, I quickly just stayed involved with the circle of friends that I had had, and hey, why don't you go out with her? Or why don't you do this? Or hey, here's somebody, and just I guess I could say I entered consciously into that. I wasn't unconscious about it, and it was just a more probably comfortable route at the time. We're talking 19 late 70s.
Mm.
Still on the spectrum of LGBT, we were just starting to use the word gay then when you talk about that. So it was just, and it still wasn't real comfortable, yeah, to even come to grips with that. And when I met my second wife, and we fell in love, and um, shared a lot of interests, and got married and had the kids, and it was a family life, and I thought I more focused on this is my responsibility.
Mm.
I've made this choice to be a dad, um, and I'm raising these kids, and I can't really, even when those thoughts did creep into the pit in my stomach, I said, nah, can't deal with that now. Can't
Mm.
deal with that now. And it wasn't until my kids got a little older in their own teens, and actually my youngest son, when he was 15 and 16, he started to, I started to pick up, for lack of a better word, vibes
Mhm.
that he was gay,
Mhm.
and talked to his mom, my wife at the time. We were all in the same house at the time. And when I first started to talk to him about it, having known my own experiences
Mhm.
and having known what I wanted to talk to him. And as a 15, 16-year-old, we had that teen dad thing that is hard for anybody, I believe.
Yeah.
And that yeah, yin and that yang, and don't talk to me, dad, all the, all that kind of stuff. But I thought, I want to open a door here. But I was trying to open that door for him. My own inner voice was saying, hey, what about your own authenticity?
Yeah.
How how Kev can you even bring this up with him when I myself haven't come to grips with it? And at the time, yeah, around that time, I was seeing counselors at the time,
Mhm.
not with my wife. Well, off and on, we were doing marriage counseling and family counseling, and so that was going on. But then I had developed a relationship with a counselor on my own, just me, and was able to talk more openly with her about um, this part of my life
Mm.
and what I was going through with him. And so I really sometimes I look back and I say in some of the when I'm talking to other people about this or giving a presentation or talking to the kids in the schools when I worked, I said, yeah, my son and I came out at the same time. And so whatever factors are at play in the universe, that was what was at play in my life. That in the coming out process, we all have our own journeys. We all have our own. Uh, did I plan this journey? No. I mean, I experienced it,
Yeah.
but did I have a plan? No. It was really and the thing that happened in terms of my own uh, maturepreneur
Mhm.
in my 50s, having um, being presented with this by my son, thinking now I can't put this away any longer. And then through counseling and working with his mom and making tough decisions and realizing that if I was going to really, as I came out more to her
Mhm.
and not yet to my kids, but that we really had to make a decision about our own relationship. And we did. Um, And I think part of what happens in the, for me, what happens in the coming, this aspect of the coming out process is that people do get hurt along the way. And as it's, even though I'm making the decision for me, there are other players. And as I look at this journey, as I look at this, this, these years of my life, this last 25 years, and knowing and still having a relationship with both my wives, um, it it was hurtful. It hurt people, and it
Mhm.
hurt people to say that, and how to come to grips with um, a spouse who has an attraction for a person of the same sex. Yeah, how does a wife handle that, or even if it's a woman, how does the husband in that relationship handle that? That's a tough call.
Yeah,
That's a tough call, and certainly there's books and there's resources and there's each year there's more and more out there to provide assistance to people. When I came out in 2005, to myself and to my wife. Um, there were some resources, but nothing. And gratefully, there's so many more today. Does it make it any easier for people? I don't know. I think coming out is a difficult process, no matter what age you are.
yeah,
I wished we didn't have to do it. I wished there wasn't a thing as such as coming out. I wished that from the start, from birth on, everybody just um,
they work.
experienced each other. Of course, we know that from what's going on in so many different venues in both of our countries. Um,
Mhm.
that there's still those hoops, and well, hoops is too light of a word.
Uh,
There's still those things that we have to navigate and work around. There is, I like to change the word coming out to going to.
mm,
And when we open this, if you want to call it this closet door, or if I let that feeling in the pit of my stomach out, it's not that I'm running away from something, it's that I'm going to something. And I think that that's helped me uh, in describing my journey and stuff too. Yeah. Yeah.
well, really just getting in integrity with who you really are, as
Mhm.
opposed to the role that you took on, because you chose that was the way to deal with it at that time. That's what made sense to you at the time, not without costs to
Oh
you.
yeah, yeah, and
To you.
sometimes, yeah, very costly. And I think as successful as I was and still am in education career,
Yep.
there was that period of time for many years where I was hiding. I was hiding behind the success of my career and
Yes.
not being able to be my authentic self. I was close to it in some of the things I worked on in school, and tried to have a sense of maybe those kids that were experiencing something that had experienced when I was their age. This is before I came out, even being an elementary teacher. But there was something I couldn't come to grip. I couldn't tell my trusted colleagues. I couldn't.
Mhm.
I wasn't my whole self, and it just became something that really just kept like a push. I had to um, work my way through it because
I
there
think
was I
there's
didn't have a choice then. I had to just keep going.
there's a big price for secrets or maintaining an image, no matter
Uh,
what it is, no matter what the quote unquote lie may be. What would you tell, what advice would you give to people who may be later in life and are trying to come back to their authentic self, whether it is that they're gay and they may be in a straight relationship right now, or they are not being fully expressed in whatever way, or true to themselves in whatever way? What's the thing that you would most wish for them?
well, I would wish for them that they would have those conversations with themselves and in an authentic way, whether they do that mentally, whether I was able to benefit a lot from journal writing and to know the privacy of my own journal and to write that I still have them, those thoughts. Um, and to be able to express myself in a way that I didn't think anybody else would be reading it.
Yeah.
Um,
Get
I
some
also, Yeah. And I think for me, that worked. That's one thing I would talk to people about. You've got, for me, and I think I would suggest that to them, there's got to be some ways to get this out.
Mhm.
If you go back to the whole concept of coming out,
Mhm.
how are you going to get out of that inside? If there is a coming out, that means there's an inside. So how is a person getting it out? The other thing that I would talk to people about is there is there's a wealth of resources now that I didn't have
Mhm.
when I was younger, and that the generations ahead of me, I don't think had. Just when we talk about the strength of social media and the internet and resources,
Mhm.
um, even when I was first thinking about coming out in 2003 to 4, 5, there were chat rooms
Mhm.
and things that we don't even reference that much anymore. But
Yeah.
I was able to discover those and find those and share my secret a little bit and talk to find other people in marital relationships that were even in my own zip code, not my zip, well, in my area, in the Chicago area where I lived at the time, I was able to find other men who were in marriages and thought it made me feel less alone. It made me feel that this, um, that yeah, I'll use the less alone,
Yeah.
that I could help navigate. So back to your question, if when I see people and meet people or read about people or get on a space internet wise where people are struggling with it, I just find a resource in your town. Journal, communicate with yourself. Keep that and don't be afraid to write anything down. Don't even use the word afraid or fear. Just say welcome. Put those words down and any writing clinic, even if you're not writing about coming out, they say just write and don't let anything stop you. Just write. And I would say that, and then find that support person or persons or group um, in your town, in your vicinity, online that can help you. Certainly, I know how this situation can eat inside so much to the point where a person can be self-destructive, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Exactly.
Um,
And
yeah.
and it also takes a toll on your relationships because you're not being fully present or
Mm-hmm.
real,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
always takes a toll. So I think that's great advice to first go in and listen to yourself and express that out on paper, whatever your format is. Don't put it on the internet because what goes
Mm-hmm.
on the
Mm-hmm.
internet stays on the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
But put it somewhere where you can start to express it. And you mentioned lots of times along the way getting support from counselors or therapists to support with being able to speak it out and in the listening of someone that doesn't judge, hopefully, if you've got the right counselor or therapist
Mm-hmm.
that can
Mm-hmm.
support you in being real with yourself, and then sharing it out perhaps another level to a community or to groups or to organizations where you can again be accepted, celebrated for who you are, and where you no longer have to keep the secret. So layers of kind of
It
coming
is layers, yeah.
towards.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest price you paid is for waiting?
Ah, the price I paid for waiting was having the psychosomatic things that happened to my body, probably the colitis or the things that would happen into where I would go to doctors and say, "Oh, I just it hurts inside and I don't know what to do about it." And they'd give me medications, or they'd say, my father would call, he said, "Oh, everybody in our family has that." He called it O'Connor's stomach, ulcers or those kind of things. As I look back, I think that sure, it was a colitis, it was a condition, but as I look back now, that was just the physical side effects of holding all this inside.
I
the
was going to
physical
ask you if
side.
you had stomach issues because you mentioned a few times the pit in your stomach.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you manifest things physically that are psychosomatic. They're, psychoneuroimmunology is the whole field of study of the mind body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when we have a pit in our stomach, it will create stomach
Yes.
issues or issues in our systems. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it also must have been very lonely for someone, as you said at the very beginning, committed to community whose purpose is
Mhm.
connection, to be disconnected, not only from yourself, but from that community and from that support and that ability to be seen and heard as who you are. That must have been a very lonely existence, even though you were surrounded by people a lot.
Sure. And because even if you're with a lot of people, ultimately I'm with myself. And yeah, it could be lonely. And I didn't, I think maybe that's where as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking that's where the acting helped me in some way, helped me and hurt me at the same time, because it helped me um, when I wanted to pursue education and I wanted to be a teacher and get a teaching job and be successful and then work on different degrees and be a principal.
Yeah.
I had to uh, I was so strong in what I wanted to do and I had strong leadership skills that I just did that in spite of what was going on inside me. But
Helped you
it
play the role.
took a lot of muster. It took a lot of muster, and I like to I tell people, and I think people believe this about me. I'm a cup very much half full person and
Mhm.
very optimistic. So even in spite of this, those first 50 years of my life, when I had this in my psyche that I was gay,
Mhm.
I didn't always call it gay, but I knew I had an attraction for men. But I couldn't tell people that, you know. Um, and as an elementary principal, uh, and as even as an elementary teacher, I was more honored, especially as a teacher. I was respected for, hey, here's a guy who wants to be an elementary teacher. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of you around, and people would parent request would come in. Yeah, we want that guy because he's a guy. And I thought, okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? So
Exactly.
why does that make me a better teacher than my colleagues on all sides of me in the other classrooms? And it helped me even to take a look. I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but as I got more into gender roles and working later in life with all that, the idea, and I could feel it as a 20-something teacher, being a male in a female profession. Um, and what it taught me was I never really saw people in my profession as male or female. I saw them as colleagues,
Yeah.
and I think that that worked in my favor. I think, and I didn't separate that out. I thought, and um, I appreciated that part about my profession, that there was room for a person like me
Yeah.
to be successful. But
Yep.
I always purpose myself. I'm not going to be successful just because I'm a guy in a female profession. I'm going to be successful because I want to learn and I want to do the best job I can. So that's how I approach my career.
And so, what was the best part for you of finally, quote unquote, coming out? What was the? I mean, I know that it's been a journey, but
Mhm.
what was the best part or the thing that you most celebrate about that?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about, each steps or procedures and I think for me, as I got more comfortable talking to a counselor or, you know, coming to the point where I actually had the conversation with my children's mother and being honest about it, it hurt. I mean, it hurt her. It hurt me because it was a big change from my life. Um, but then as I told, as then I could go and tell somebody else. And if I told a colleague at work who I trusted, and she wouldn't tell anybody. But I thought, okay, that's one more person that accepts me.
Okay.
When I was able to talk to my mom about it, they accept me after the divorce, and I was able to then talk to my brothers and my two sons who were then in their 20s. And so each time I told somebody, those were all gratifying steps. And all those, and I was able to tell another friend and another friend. And by really telling those friends is what led me to Leon. And so when if I'd kept that all a secret, I never would have met Leon.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
and so
finally,
that's it. Yeah.
being seen and heard and accepted for who you actually are versus who you were, the roles you were playing up until that point. And so,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
long ago did you meet your husband?
I met him next month. This month we celebrate 19 years of our when we first
Wow.
met.
Wow. So
19
not,
years.
not long after you came out, you met him
It
fairly.
sort of happened, it happened, yeah, it happened really the same year.
Oh,
And
wow.
not
Okay.
that I expected that. When I made the decision in 2005 to be more to talk to my
Yeah.
son. He already had some of those discussions with him, but then to be more present with my wife about it at the time and get through the tears as best we could and to make decisions as best we could, both individually and as a couple. So all that was going on, and I didn't have any aspirations at the time, or what am I going to do with this? Uh, what kind of life? I just figured at that time, um, I'm going to be separated and divorced, but I had no idea what was going to happen. And so in talking to friends about this and what I was going through, a college friend, same year, 2005, he had started. He and I reestablished communication. Lo and behold, he had been. This is not Leon. This is somebody else. He too had experienced this coming out of a marriage and what to do, and so he became a confidant and one of the people I was able to open up to with confidence and with authenticity and with trust.
Mm.
And he's the one that said to me one day, he called me one day and he said in 2005, I was still living at home, had chosen to move to a different part of the house. Um, and he said, I got a friend that has experienced what we've experienced and what you're going through. And he's somebody else you might like to talk to.
Awesome.
And so he didn't do it with the idea that he was going to pair up Dan and I,
Doesn't
but
matter.
he wasn't that wasn't he as we replay the story later, he was really worried at the time that I was suicidal
Mm.
and that he wanted to help me and protect me, and he thought if I would just be able to talk to another person, it would help me. So I guess going back to your previous question, it when I decided that when I came out in 2005 and talked initially to my mom, I had two more years left in my principal contract, and I never pictured myself as what I at the time called a soapbox gay. Some people would stand up on a soapbox and say, I'm gay and I'm going to carry this sign and I'm going to do this and I'm going to,
Yep.
even though I'm a school principal, this is who I am. And I didn't do that. Just the timing for that didn't seem, I wanted to do it a person at a time. And if I hadn't had that discussion with my college friend Jaime, I wouldn't have met Leon.
Mm.
And so it was, as I look back on it, this journey, it was just telling a person one at a time. Now that I expect when my wife and I in the spring of 2005, in summer of 2005, made this tough decision. Did I expect that I was going to meet somebody within 5 or 6 weeks?
Mm.
No, that that wasn't that was something that was controlled by some sort of karma
Yeah.
that I can't even speak to.
Well,
Um,
I think when we come back into alignment with who we really are, then there is space for us to have what we want because we're being who we need to be. So then we're doing the kinds of things that are in accordance with that, in integrity with that, and then we have the results of that. So,
yeah, yeah.
so
And
I hope, ladies
huh,
and gentlemen, what you're hearing in this, even though we haven't really talked about the courage it took, but this is a journey of courage to say, here's who I authentically am, whether that is your spirituals and woo woo, and you don't want to bring that out into public, or you're gay, or you are whatever it may be, you're entrepreneurial in a family full of non-entrepreneurs, whatever it is that is or you're an artist and a family of doctors or lawyers or whatever is your truth. It is so important. And the
Mm-hmm.
other message here is it's never too late to claim
Yes.
truth. It's never too late to say, it's my time to be who I am. And however you do it, whether it's one at a time or from a soapbox or, quietly over time or with a big, take out a banner, I don't care what it is, whatever your way is your way. And that's okay. That is,
Yeah, very much, very well stated. And the
and
idea that we don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone.
that's the other thing I was going to say. And even though much of this has been a solitary journey and process for you, you've also really called in support at various stages. I think that's so important. Don't go through this challenge of not being who you really are alone. Let
Yeah,
yourself have
yeah,
ways to express it. Start with a journal, start with a counselor, start with one friend. However you do it, please start. And it's never too late. I don't care if you're 55 or 65 or 75, 90. If it's the day before you die, it's never too
yes,
late to be who you are. All right,
yes.
so let's
So
just
true, so true.
really
Hmm.
quickly, because we've talked about this for a while, let's talk really quickly about your other coming out, and that is you becoming an entrepreneur at 70, really. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you decided to write a book. So you were in education and you decided to write a book, which is Two Floors Above Grief, and it's a memoir of two families in a unique place we called home. So
Yes.
this memoir journey was
Yeah.
obviously the journey of your life, and you lived in a very unusual kind of situation. I'll just say a stately three-story 19th century Victorian, his bed tucked next to a stage in a former ballroom. His uncle and aunt lived with their three daughters on the floor below, a large electric organ in the corner of the first floor mortuary business, stacked caskets, and an embalming room in the basement. Nobody had a house like this. So you can go and get that book, Two Floors Above Grief, at Amazon, of course, and other
Yeah.
places,
Uh-huh.
and on
Yeah.
Kevin's site. So you can go to his site, which is KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com. But let's talk about you, because you mentioned some things about starting to move into being an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
writing a book is a journey and a process, and it can be simply for creative purposes. It can be not about selling books, but you are now starting to get interested in at 70 in marketing and business and so forth. Tell me why. What prompted you to want to become an entrepreneur at this point?
Well, in writing the book, I didn't call myself when I decided to, okay, I'm going to write this book. I've been wanting to do this for a long time about my upbringing and the unique place in which I grew up, and the family that supported me through all that. And but the writing part, I didn't consider myself entrepreneur. I considered myself author, writer. Yes, I had to pick up certainly skills. I was been a writer all my life, but this kind of memoir writing was different. So as I did with my coming out process, I sought help. I sought people who'd done this before. I sought out people. How do you put a book together? And so I learned. And being an educator, I've always been a learner. And one of the things that drew me to being a teacher back in the late 60s, 70s was the idea I like learning. How am I gonna continue to learn? I thought, oh, I'm gonna continue to learn by being a teacher. Well, lo and behold, you do that in any profession. But in my thinking as a late teen, 20 something, I thought, okay, teaching is the way I can continue to learn.
Mhm.
And that certainly has held true. So the idea of writing the book, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur, but when as I put the book, as I worked with others to put the book through the editing process, and then how do you get it published? And then, oh, I'm going to be a business now.
Yes.
I'm going to, and I'm self-published. So it wasn't like I was turning my book over to a publisher who was going to take care of this. Uh, I was going to do this not I say myself. So I sought out the help and the counsel and the people that could help me self-publish a book. And then it was then that I started to, as they taught me how to do the things I needed to do to publish and to launch a book and to market a book and where to go and how to get it into um, on-site locations. And it took leg power and hand power and head power. And I thought, oh, now I'm KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com
Yes.
because, and that's who I am. I'm like the other websites I visit. I'm like the other business. I'm like my dad. I'm like my uncle who in 1930 decided they wanted to start their own business. And they were entrepreneurs in 1930, moving to a brand new town to start a funeral home. They
Mhm.
were entrepreneurs. And I thought, Kevin, so are you.
Yep.
And so, and here I was in my, just turning 70, 71. And then since the book's publication 18 months ago, I've really taken the task on willingly and pleasantly of what am I learning to how do I market this book? What do I need to know about? And this is, I was intrigued by your guest the other day. Who was the person that did the Instagram things? Oh, Ruthie Gray.
Yep.
And when I was looking at the synopsis of your podcast, oh, that's somebody, and I really enjoyed listening to her
Mhm.
and how she evolved into that whole thing of social media. And certainly, even though I'm pretty adept at social media, I think for a while, the whole concept of how do you market yourself? How do I market my book?
Yep.
How do I draw the line between my personal context and my business? That's part of the entrepreneur journey for me, the maturepreneur, and
Exactly.
and the idea that and when in those little moments when I catch myself, and it isn't very frequent and it isn't very long, you're too old to do this.
Yeah.
No, I snip that off right away. No, this is, Whistler's mother was, or whether the stories about people that have had their careers this continue and continue and continue. And I've still got a lot of strength, a lot of energy, a lot of wherewithal, resilience, purpose, the things that you need to be a business owner, an entrepreneur, a maturepreneur. So, and I think, like I said earlier in our conversation, I love how you've put that word together. It gives it the idea that a person my age can give this validity
Yeah.
and to
Absolutely.
say, hey, and know in my head that as I'm doing this, I'm firing up neurons and things in my brain that I would never have done. And when I meet people my age, either people I've known for a long time or people I've just met at my age and they tell me they're bored or they don't know what to do I thought, oh wow.
Yeah.
That's the furthest thought from my mind. And I think
Absolutely. Well, and
entrepreneurship entrepreneurship's a blessing, I think. A
it
blessing. Yeah.
is. It's an opportunity to reinvent yourself or
Hmm.
to explore what you're passionate about. And for
Hmm.
you, the book is wasn't the end result. It was the end result of a part of the journey, but and for actually any author, people, think that the biggest part of writing a book is writing the book. It's actually not. It is part of it, even though it can be arduous. Really getting the book into the world is the most challenging part of it. And even if you go with the publisher, you said, the publisher would do things for you. They actually don't. They do very
Yeah, I
little
know.
for you.
Yeah.
They rely on you having a platform, you doing your own marketing, you doing your own publicity. They don't do very much for you at all. So you really want to consider whether or not you want to be self-published, hybrid, which is a combination, or
Yeah, right. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and So it sounds like it's kind of given you some new things to learn, a new spark, some new,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that can really revitalize. There's a statistic that says that when we have purpose later in life, we live an additional 7 qualitative years. So qualitative meaning happier and healthier. When we
Mm-hmm.
don't, if we're isolated or we don't have purpose or we're lonely, that takes 8 years off your life. And so,
Yeah.
I can even see just in the, saying it looks like it's really kind of giving you purpose. You light up and say, oh yeah, there's an excitement that being passionate about something, whatever it may be, brings to the writing of the next chapter of our lives. And that's what I kind of call
Yeah,
this
yeah.
process. Is it's we are the authors of our lives. Some of us have not consciously authored. Some of us have decided that we are we've just kind of gone through life reacting and coping and dealing, but then at some point, we can always choose to get into the driver's seat, to become the author. So, literally, what I hear in your journey, Kevin, is you not only decided to become the author of your authenticity, but also the author of your story, your memoir, and therefore the author of the next stage of your life as well.
Well stated. Yeah, like I
Yeah,
guess that the
beautiful.
idea and trying to, I hadn't heard it put that way, but I think we've, what we've covered. I was the author of my coming out, I guess.
Yeah.
I was and knowing when I get discouraged, and I don't let it happen too often. I get discouraged. Oh, the sales aren't going well, or I didn't get that gig, or oh, that one didn't work out,
Yeah.
or that promotion didn't work out. I'm thinking, wait a minute. Think of all the other things you've done in your life, Kevin.
Exactly.
And just the idea, whether it's putting it in the framework of coming out and getting through that journey, or being a 50-year educator, um, I didn't always get the job I wanted, or have the success in my school when I was principal. A lot of programs went well. Some didn't go well at all. And then I keep thinking of little things like when you think about the baseball player Babe Ruth, how many times he struck out. We only think about the times he hit home runs, or it took how many times for Edison to invent the light bulb. It took so many failures.
Yes.
Just I just finished watching that movie Lessons in Chemistry based on the
Yes.
book.
And that was
And
that was a very good one too.
yes, and
Yeah.
just knowing all the things that were thrown at her. I know
Mhm.
it's probably fiction based on some real life occurrences
Yeah.
too. I haven't delved too much into Bonnie Garmus's background or anything, but just but knowing what that character went through, um, and just you learn from what happened before, and you just keep on. And I like that she just kept on, and she keeps on, and I like to think that's what drives me in this stage of my life, and publishing and marketing, and learning in the last year and a half that what they tell me in the self-publishing world, the one way to sell one book is to write another one. I thought, oh, so to take and now I'm working on that one, and to frame that writing of the next book as a piece of marketing.
Mhm.
So it helps me to navigate that process to say, okay, we've used the word purpose.
Mhm.
Uh, the purpose of the second book is to help the first one, and to keep that stimulated in my brain about the writing process and how to do it, and then even that, as I work on the second book, I keep thinking, huh, you did this the first time, Kev. You
Yeah.
can do it again. And I've got things in my office here hanging up, just following the same process. Hey, it worked before. Why wouldn't it work again?
And
So I think that's part of the spirit of my entrepreneurship.
awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being here and for sharing so honestly about your journey and your reinvention, and what I wrote down when I was looking over your content and so forth was going in to come out. And so part of what I hear is the theme of a lot of what you shared is that it's necessary to go in, to really go into who are we, to have that honest conversation with ourselves. and to say, okay, I'm not in alignment. So what do I need to do to get into alignment, however hard
Hmm.
it may be? And am I ready? Am I willing to deal with what it is that I need to do at this point? If I'm not, then let go of torturing yourself and shoulds and be willing to deal with it when it is true. So going in, and then the same thing with your book. You went into your story and your history and your family's genealogy and letters and various things that helped inform and create the book, as
Hmm.
well as your sense of your history, um, not just personal but familial, um,
Sure.
so that you could come out in the form of the book.
Yes.
You're
Good
going
idea.
into your learning and your conscious incompetence around marketing and business and all of those things, so that you can come out as an entrepreneur. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you hear in this an example of courage, willingness, and honesty with yourself and then with others about who you are going into that, so that you can come out and be the gift that only you can be in the world.
Mm.
So, Kevin, when people want to connect with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Okay, there's a couple ways. One way is to my website, which you mentioned kindly. Thank you in the broadcast. KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com.
Yeah.
One thing I caution is O'Connor is spelled O-R and not E-R. So Kevin O'Connor author.com. And on that website, there is a lots of things there on the website. One is just a media page, which lists all kinds of things, my media one page, what we call it. So if they're looking for topics that I talk about or subject matter that I'm involved in, there's that. And then there's a list of other podcast recordings, which this one will be added to that when it gets published. So that's on the website. And the other thing, when they go to the website, they have an opportunity to sign up, and that connects them to a newsletter that I put out once a week. And that newsletter is just conveys different stories about the book and things that I'm doing. I published this week's newsletter this morning, and that one is about the other work that I'm doing now. It's called The Grief Navigator, and I have a moniker, or I guess for a label, whatever you call it. Have to go back and get the proper term from Ruthie Gray here. But my name on Instagram is called The Grief Navigator. So it's at The Grief Navigator. And what I'm doing with that site, which connects with Facebook and LinkedIn as well, um, is to direct people to sources that they can go to find, to navigate their grief
Mm,
and to know all. And what I've learned is a son, nephew of an undertaker, just by osmosis and observation and involvement, that I can, stories I convey in the book about what it was like to be living in that kind of environment. But also in the 50 years since I
mm,
left that
being involved with
that
your family.
nest,
Yeah.
all the things, yeah, all the different types of grief I've encountered, whether it be the grief of coming out,
Mm,
whether it be, and there's certainly aspects of grief in the coming out process, joy as well, but certainly grief. And so with the Grief Navigator, what I do is I find other sources that, and there's a richness now that we didn't have years ago. One benefit of the internet, there's a richness of resources of people who communicate very openly about grief. And
mm,
whether it's grief from a death or grief from a separation, grief from the loss of a friendship, grief from an estrangement, uh, grief from just other kinds of loss. Even moving from one house to another can have elements of grief. So what I do with the Grief Navigator is just direct people to sources that I have found on the internet. Hey, here's one you might enjoy. Here's one you can look into. Uh, I'm not a grief counselor in that regard, but I'm a navigator,
right.
and I help direct people to resources that they may find beneficial. So that's another way that your listeners can find me, is just on Instagram, the Grief Navigator.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time with us and your open conversation. I think it's so important for us to really tell the truth about
Yeah.
reality that different people experience, and to really underscore whether it is writing a book, coming out about your sexual orientation, claiming your creativity, whatever it is never too late, and you deserve to be who you really are, because
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
that is the gift in you. Thank you for being here, everybody, and listening to this long, but hopefully very interesting and fascinating podcast. If you do want support, reach out to a resource, a counselor, a therapist in your area. Reach out to me. I do work with a lot of people who are in transition, various kinds of transition, whether it's into entrepreneurship, out of entrepreneurship, personally transitioning in various different ways. Get a coach, get a counselor, get someone who can be an objective listener and who can support you in your next steps. You don't have to do this alone.
No.
Life is a team sport. All right. Thanks for being here, Kevin, and thanks for listening, everybody. Have a bodacious week. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.